I want to touch on this subject. Want to get your perspective. ICE, Palantir works with Immigration Customs Enforcement. Now they license their software to the government, and the government obviously uses their software in whatever way they want to do. And Palantir has been explicit that look, we give software. We don't have ideological biases towards an administration that uses our software. We may not always agree with what they do, but this is how we do business. And CARP has explicitly said if you're a military soldier in Iraq and you're wearing the device of a company that is going to be biased if there's a Republican in president, you're not going to trust that company with your life. And to protect freedoms, you really need to trust that company. Do you think, so first, how do you feel about them actually working with ICE, and just like anything the government wants them to do that may be morally not significant to most people? And B, if the company gets bigger and bigger and bigger and it starts getting a lot more media attention, how do you feel the company is going to be portrayed? Because as we know, when companies get bigger, journalists dig up the biggest articles they can find, right? And they put them in the limelight. How do you think Palantir is going to deal with this from an ESG perspective as they get older?
So I think right now, when it comes to Palantir and working with ICE and everything else, there are governmental organizations out there within other departments that actually do really well, right? ICE also arrests people coming across the border who are kidnappers, right? Coyotes that are bringing people here.
And that's
right?
why Palantir was contracted by the Obama administration, because someone got killed from ICE, and that was the whole point of bringing Palantir into the Homeland Security's division in the beginning.
Yeah. Exactly. So I think a lot of times Palantir, if it were not for Donald Trump getting elected in 2016, I think a lot of people would never have even really called Palantir out on their ICE issues, right?
I agree.
It's one of those things where you have to remember Palantir really cut its teeth under President Obama. And President Obama, being a really good technocrat, understood that there is a lot of value in bringing amazing software to different parts of the government. No one purchases software with the idea of I'm going to use this to kill people, or I'm going to use it to do things that are going to be detrimental to other people's lives. But at the end of the day, there are certain mandates that people have to follow, right? And those mandates, if they're violated, guess what? The software is going to help us. One of the things that I'll tell you is like drones, right? Like Palantir helped in targeting people using the drones, right? Yeah. Their technology goes right into that. But think about it this way: were it not for that technology helping targeting people, what would happen? What's the alternative? Well, guess what? We'll just drop a bomb and level the entire block. Now you have an entire village getting decimated. So there are concepts around technology where it'll let you focus in on things that kind of like lowers collateral damage. And that's what Palantir essentially does, where there are probably good parts about it and probably some negatives of parts about it, but you can't vilify the tool. You have to vilify the user, right? And the intention of that user. If the intention of the user, like President Trump, was to target citizens within the country and start using it to use extrajudicial killings, and Palantir somehow was, a co-conspirator in that, then yeah, that's definitely something that we really need to hammer Palantir on, but that's not the case, right? It's being utilized by the government to do things, yes, sometimes in a negative way, but also in a positive way too, to help affect positive changes. So I think Palantir does not have to necessarily worry about the moral implications of some of the technologies and who they partner with. Like I said, it's one of those things that even Alec Karp says, like, it's a thing that really kept him up at night, because some of the really good engineers left Palantir over their stance. But at the end of the day, if your entire ethos is we're going to be protecting, Western values, right? We need to make sure that the West is getting the tools that it needs to keep those values.
Right.
So it's one of those things that I think Palantir has been unfairly kind of hammered about, and we'll see what happens. But as my biggest concern with something like that is that top engineering talent tends to lean very liberal, right? And that might be one of those things that detracts people from joining Palantir, because they're like, well, I don't necessarily want to work for a company that, that targets minorities or targets immigrants, right? And that's kind of sad, because that's not what Palantir does, right? You're looking at the smallest piece of their business to get to cast the widest opinion, and that's not necessarily the case. So I think That's one of the things that Palantir, and that's why one of the things that I've been advocating is Palantir kind of like split off into like two different companies, like one Gotham and one commercial. Because I think a lot of times the commercial partners might be more in line with working with them if they didn't have the I would say the moral like stink of working with that part. Because when you're working with a company, it sucks.
Yeah.
You have to make a decision, and you have investors too. So if your investors say, hey, listen, don't work with Palantir, what are you going to do? Even if it's a product that's revolutionary, and that's coming down. That's happening to here in New York City. Like New York City, I don't know if you know, but NYPD uses Palantir. The justice, like like the whole the law enforcement here. Yeah, law enforcement here, they love it, but at the same time, a lot of liberal politicians that say if I get elected, I'm kicking Palantir out. What are you going to do about that?
I was reading an article about predictive policing, and there's obviously a lot of negatives towards it, and it's a deeper discussion. But they were originally called in by New Orleans Police Department just to implement it. And when I was reading the quotes from the mayor of the city, he was like, "We got people killing each other." He's like, it was not about like apprehending individuals for sort of racial ideals or something. It was more so about we have inner city violence that we need tools to stop. And I think I'm forgetting the statistic. It's like either from 12 to 18% of murders decreased as a result of implementing Palantir. And I'll put the article in the description so people can fact check on that. But I mean, like, and this is the nature of ethics in business. It's like, what are the costs and benefits? Because as you said, do you want to kill a village with a bunch of women and kids die? Or do you want to apprehend a couple of specific people, but that technology has to be at the core center of it? And same thing with predictive policing, same thing with these ideas of stopping inner city violence. These are complicated discussions. And I think it's very easy to just be like, oh, Google's good, Facebook's good. When in reality, the people that are paying for ads on Facebook, I mean, I could start an ad on Facebook. I've done an ad on Facebook. I could say anything I want within reason and put some wild stuff in front of you. And that's more ethical. It's like, these are hard discussions, but because those things are swept under the rug and it's under the brand of Meta or Google, right? People don't care.
And that's the thing. Like one of the things I encourage everyone to do, especially if you think that, a lot of these big tech companies are amazing, especially the social media ones, go watch The Social Dilemma on Netflix. It'll open your eyes to a lot of things. I don't know if you've seen it.
I've seen it.
But literally after seeing it, I see that there's huge issues with that. The rate of suicide has gone through the roof with young preteen girls. And no one is like, oh yeah, we need to get rid of TikTok. There's so many people doing God knows what. And it's one of those things that you have to ask yourself, like, am I just a product? Do I want to work with a company where I'm being productized?
Right.
So I'm not saying that, Google and Facebook and everything are uninvestable or anything else, but I would just say if you have a lot of moral stance against Palantir because some of the things that they do, especially who they've worked with, then you should evaluate that same criteria and use it against your investment with Facebook and Google and Microsoft and whoever else is also peddling. Well, not Microsoft, but you're peddling your social media wares with.
As Palantir gets bigger, do you think that these concerns morally are going to hinder the growth? Like, is there going to be a major ESG concern if they get Business Insider attention? Like, if the stock price goes from 15 now to like 50 in the next 7 months or 7 8 months, this stuff's likely going to come up. How do you think they're going to work through these issues? Are they going to put out a tweet saying, hey, like what, this is what we do?
I think the best thing they could do is just do good works, right? Anyone who you have something negative to say about, if they're doing things that are improving and helping the community and you constantly are highlighting that, then that takes away from the negative press, right? And that's what I think that's what they should do. They should highlight their work with the World Food Program, right? Their response to Hurricane Katrina, their response with Team Rubicon. They need to COVID. They need to highlight all the good parts, right? Because the minute you keep highlighting the good parts and so many good parts that you have, especially like if you hit them with so much good thing, then that whole ICE argument, what are you going to do? You're going to keep saying, oh yeah, they work with ICE. They work with ICE. Dude, I'm tired of hearing about they work with ICE. I get it. They also saved a lot of people's lives. So guess what? I'm sorry. The ICE
saved like 3,000 kids from being trafficked as a result of ICE.
Yeah. So it just comes down to making sure you're highlighting your better parts so that the parts that are critical about you kind of, I don't want to say get swept under the rug, but get ignored as they should. Like right now with Tesla, a lot of people are saying, well, you know what? Tesla uses like all these minerals from countries in Africa, right? That, yeah, but what's the alternative? We build 1,000 more coal plant. I mean, what do you call it? Like oil, we keep using oil for the rest of our lives? Like, no, there are
This is a
definitely
hard
ways that we can
question.
change things. Yeah.
We agree that the ends justify the means. Like we'd rather
Charlemagne, what is that? Charlemagne, like that said that quote,
Yeah.
Yeah.
The end result of like having electric vehicles and transforming the world, but doing some crappy stuff to get there, it seems to outweigh letting ourselves die into 2050 and use up all the oil in the world.
Exactly. So I think it's the same thing with regards to Palantir and like where they're going to be hopefully in the future. Like I think all the productivity improvements, all the savings, and especially because if they're working with Western companies, that means our Western companies will be competitive against these Chinese companies, right? If you have a company that's based in the US, if their productivity levels are like this and the Chinese companies' productivity levels are like this, who does that benefit? That benefits the West. So I would say right now, we have to understand that China and Russia are our adversaries. Anything that we can do to help our corporations become better, more nimbler, more efficient, we should do it. And Palantir that falls right back into what Palantir's mission is. So if it's protecting Western democracy, Western values, that also means protecting Western capitalism, right? So that's right back where it goes again.